And initially we thought actually, if when we combined it with our Activase greenlet mussel, it would probably have an additive effect. So 1 + 1 = 2. And this was within our in vitro studies. But actually what we found was actually something a bit more interesting. So it appeared to have a synergistic effect. So when you combined the Hoki and the greenlet mussel together, they delivered more than we would have expected from each ingredient on its own.
Hey, VetFolio Voice listeners, welcome back. This episode is sponsored by Vetnique and features Dr. Jane Laycock, who was just lovely to talk to and shared so much knowledge about supporting joint health. Joint health issues have become a big topic of conversation recently, especially as we're recognizing them in younger dogs. And because we're recognizing them in younger dogs, there's a lot more focus on how we can support joint health early so we can keep our patients mobile over the long run in ways that are practical and sustainable. We spent a good bit of time in this episode talking about omega-3 fatty acids and some of the science behind how they work and why not all omega-3s are created equal. And we talked about how to better understand the ingredients in joint supplements so we can make thoughtful and confident supplement recommendations for our patients. One area I know I've been particularly focused on recently is how we have these conversations with pet owners of younger dogs who may have us concerned for joint disease, but who the owners perceive as healthy and mobile, and who, because they're theoretically otherwise healthy, we're really only seeing once, maybe twice a year. I mean, as we all know, life in general practice is often busy, and there's only so much we can realistically cover in one visit. So I asked Dr. Laycock her thoughts on how we can effectively communicate all of the information that we're trying to get to pet owners outside of just the annual exam, how to communicate this with them in ways that are practical and sustainable and usable for pet owners. So as you can, I'm sure, tell, this ended up being a really wide-ranging conversation. Dr. Laycock was great. Let me introduce her and we will talk about it. Dr. Laycock qualified from the Royal Veterinary College in London in 1995 and went on to gain broad clinical experience in both mixed and small animal practice across the UK and New Zealand. In 2006, she transitioned into industry as a veterinary technical advisor, where she combined her clinical insight with a growing interest in veterinary education and communication. During this time, she also began contributing written content to the veterinary sector. Dr. Laycock returned to small animal practice in 2009 and developed a particular interest in geriatric care. Her dedication to senior pets was driven by the meaningful relationships she built with owners and the rewarding challenge of managing the complex needs of aging animals. Since joining Vetnique, home of UMove, in 2021, Dr. Laycock has taken on the role of head veterinary technical. In this role, she draws on her clinical background and communication skills to support veterinary professionals and pet owners alike through evidence-based guidance, education, and technical support. She's passionate about pet well-being and values working within a purpose-driven organization committed to making a difference. Let's go ahead and get into our episode.
Nutrition is the cornerstone of our patients' health and happiness. The veterinary healthcare team should be the ultimate source for top-notch pet nutrition info. When clients see how the right diet helps their pets stay healthy and happy, they visit us more often. Remember, good nutrition is essential. It's smart business and great medicine. Enroll in the NAVC Pet Nutrition Coach certification today on vetfolio.com.
All right, well, in this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Jane Laycock. We're going to talk about joint health and how we as veterinary professionals can help support our patients and maintain joint health over the long term. So, Dr. Laycock, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Dr. Cassie. Thank you for having me.
Yes. I'm really excited to get into this from a science perspective of what we know about different ways that we can support joint health, starting with, the science, I guess. When we think about joint supplements and the ingredients that are included in these supplements, what joint supplement ingredients are supported by evidence, and are there any in particular that stand out and have particularly strong evidence behind them?
I think that's a really great question. And as you know, you're still in practice, Dr. Cassie, but I know that as vets in practice, we're really, really time short. So I think the first place I would start is really looking at the bigger picture evidence. I think that rather than looking at one study in isolation, it helps to look at those review papers where we're looking really at a broad range of ingredients across multiple studies. So there's some great reviews out there. So it's really worth taking a look at those. And I will put a link, obviously, so that people can look at the review papers. They'll often do the hard work for you in terms of the research that's relevant. And actually, when you look at that evidence, there is a 2022 paper review which has found really good supportive evidence for omega-3 fatty acids. So really, whether they come from diet or from supplements, I think those omega-3 fatty acids are really, really important in supporting joint health.
Sure. And that's kind of where I have landed with my limited knowledge of the evidence out there, is that omega-3s seem to be one ingredient, one selection that does have some pretty strong evidence when it comes to supporting joint health. We talk to clients about this, right? And we're, omega-3s and, doing that to support joint health. But from sticking with the science perspective here, what is the mechanism of action of these omega-3s in helping to kind of support that inflammatory response?
Absolutely. That's, again, another great question. Really hard to explain that process on a podcast, but I'm going to do my best. And I'm going to admit something here, Dr. Cassie, that when I was in practice in the UK for many, many years, I knew omega-3s were great. I knew they were great for dogs to support their joint health, but actually I didn't know how they worked. And I think we talked earlier, didn't we? And you knew exactly how they worked, so I was really impressed.
Truthfully, though, I have to credit doing this job for the reason that I know why they work or how they work the way that they do. Because I didn't, for years, I was in the same boat. I had no idea. And then I read it doing something VetFolio related, and I went, I had this light bulb moment.
Yeah. It's really clever,
I think we're in really good company here, not really knowing how they work.
That makes me feel better. Anyway, obviously, I do know how they work now. So at a very simplistic level, like what we're really doing is nutritionally influencing, or let's say gently manipulating the body's natural inflammatory response. So the omega-3s actually interact with the inflammatory pathways in the body. So it's those COX and LOX pathways that I'm sure most of our audience will have heard of. And importantly, the omega-3s actually act as competitor substrates to the omega-6 fatty acid arachidonic acid. So essentially, they're competing for the same pathway. So they're not blocking those enzymes. I think that's really important. They're actually just competing with the omega-6s to enter into those pathways. So when those omega-3s are available in the body starts to use those instead of the omega-6s, and that really helps to shift the balance away from the production of the more pro-inflammatory mediators that we will see with the omega-6s into the pathways towards those less inflammatory mediators. It is difficult to explain over a podcast, but I hope that makes sense. So we're just kind of shifting that balance with those omega-3s to a more calmer environment. I hope that makes sense, Dr. Cassie.
So actually, that was really helpful. I did know that it was competition for arachidonic acid, but beyond that, I kind of get lost, and I'm going, I don't actually know.
Totally understandable. And I think we're scraping at the surface there. I think there's a lot of other things that go on as well.
Right.
This is a very sort of, at a very simplistic level, for sure.
Yes. Oh, and I love diving into those pathways and kind of following things through. And then, of course, you walk away for 5 minutes and it's all gone because my brain can only hold so much of that at one time. When we're thinking of omega-3s in managing joint health, I know particularly when we're thinking of joint health, we're giving much higher doses of omega-3s compared to maybe some other conditions we might be giving omega-3s for. Why is the dosage so much higher when it comes to joint health?
So I think the key comes back to the omega-3s being a competitor substrate. It's that word competitor. So it is competing with the omega-6s. And we know that the omega-3s and the omega-6s actually are incorporated into the cell membrane, and that is where the levels really, really matter. So those membranes are naturally rich in omega-6s. They're naturally rich in the arachidonic acid. So what you need to do is really flood those cell membranes with omega-3 fatty acids to try and shift that balance. So it does mean, consistent intake, really meaningful levels. So you will find with joint supplements that contain omega-3s, and certainly with our joint supplement UMove, we would recommend that you're doubling the amount for the first few weeks so that you're really flooding those membranes with those omega-3 fatty acids. I think another area to bear in mind as well is it's really important to think about the source of omega-3s as well. So we haven't really talked about EPA and DHA, but when we talk about nutritionally influencing those pathways, those are the two omega-3 fatty acids that I'm talking about. Is that something you've come across as well, Cassie? Have you heard of EPA, DHA?
I have, and I was going to say, now we're revealing how limited my knowledge of, clearly I've been given too much credit for my knowledge of how omega-3s work. So I have heard of them, but I don't know that I'm totally clear on what exactly we're looking for when it comes to these different levels.
So we know we do need high levels of EPA and DHA. That's because we need to flood those cell membranes in order to get them incorporated into the cell membrane, so really make that difference. So actually, when you're looking for omega-3s, you'd be looking for those marine sources of omega-3s. So that's really important. So fish oil does, for example, provide EPA and DHA, and that's probably the one that you're thinking about when you're thinking about delivering omega-3 fatty acids to a pet, a cat or a dog, to support their joints. But there are plant-based sources there as well. So that's worth really being aware of, because there are plant-based sources of omega-3s. Usually, and I say usually, they provide an omega-3 called ALA. But in dogs, and especially in cats, they're not very good at converting the ALA into EPA and DHA. So that's where your pathway knowledge comes in quite useful. So actually, they're much less effective in this context. So that's why I think the source is really important as well. So things like flax, for example, they're rich in omega-3s, and that's great, but it is ALA. So in this context, you really want those omega-3s to be EPA and DHA. But obviously we do have that additional source of omega-3s. And it's I guess our star ingredient as well within our supplementation is green-lip mussel. So were you aware, Dr. Cassie, that actually green-lip mussel is a good source of omega-3s? Is that something you're aware of?
So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was the other kind of ingredient I was going to ask you about, was green-lip mussel, because that's another source that I've heard commonly in joint supplements as being supportive of joint health. But I don't think I actually knew why green-lip mussel.
Okay. So I love green-lip mussel. I could talk to you for hours on green-lip mussel.
Anytime I've heard about it, I'm like, this is fascinating. But then what kind of sticks in my brain is like green-lip mussel, good. And then I forget why. So I love that we're diving into it again.
Fantastic. Well, don't worry, I won't talk for too long on green-lip mussel. We'll dig into it. So like fish oil, it is a marine-based ingredient and is a great source for omega-3 fatty acids. Yay. So again, in fish oil, the main omega-3s are, can you remember, Cassie? EPA
and DHA.
Brilliant!
Yay!
Yay! And we know that they do a great job when given in large amounts. Green-lip mussel also provides EPA and DHA, so it does include those omega-3 fatty acids. But what makes it different is it does contain a broader range of omega-3 fatty acids, a much broader range of fatty acids, including an omega-3 called ETA, which we believe to be a key omega-3 in supporting joint health. But it also contains other naturally occurring compounds. So they include other bioactive lipids, proteins, glycosaminoglycans, vitamins. So it's not just one single nutrient. I think that's what's important with green-lip mussel. It's the range of compounds, and particularly the different omega-3s, which play a key role in supporting our pets' joint health and our own joint health as well.
That's really cool that it provides so many different ways of supporting joint health.
That's right. And the beauty of green-lip mussel, and one of the reasons that we do use it as well, is we know we need relatively high amounts of EPA, DHA from the literature to be effective. But we know with green-lip mussel, we can actually use lower amounts to be effective. We think it's because of this kind of broader nutritional profile that it has. So it's a great ingredient to put into a supplement because you want to be able to deliver it in lower amounts as well. So that's one of the main reasons that we use it. Of course, that's underpinned by quality. Quality is absolutely key. So not all green-lip mussel is created equal, and I think that's well worth being aware of. Omega-3s, we have to ensure that their nutritional integrity is maintained. And it's very easy to damage those omega-3s once they're outside of the green-lip mussel. So it's very important in how we harvest and source and grow and process that green-lip mussel to ensure that that nutritional integrity is maintained when we get it into the dog. Sorry, that was a bit waffly then.
No, I think I got it all.
Do that one again.
I think I took away the points you were after, that this is a really good source of EPA and DHA, and because of the, when sourcing a high quality source of green lip mussel, that we're getting this EPA and DHA, and because it has this wide range of benefits, we can potentially provide lower amounts compared to a different source of EPA and DHA.
That's right.
And that seems really beneficial, because we will get that occasional animal that'll get GI upset with fish oil supplementation at those high doses and things like that.
Right.
And then to also be aware of the sourcing of green lip mussel, because like you said, it's not all created equal, and making sure that the integrity of these omega-3 fatty acids is being maintained while incorporating them into whatever supplement we're after.
That's exactly it. And actually, it's one of the reasons. So we've trademarked our green lip mussel that we use with Activise, because we want pet owners to feel confident that they're getting our particular specification of green lip mussel and quality of green lip mussel. So, for example, we will only grow our green lip mussel in certain bays in New Zealand because they're filter feeders. They are literally what they eat. So we know that we need to grow them in very specific areas to ensure that they are the specification that we are particularly looking for. We'll only harvest them at certain times to make sure that, again, that we're getting that omega-3 specification that we're looking for as well. And also the processing of that green lip mussel is really, really key. So we use a rapid drying technique. So we're really preserving those key nutrients. We're not exposing them to lots of changes in heat over a very, very long period of time. So that's really key. So for every step, from where they're grown to how they're harvested and processed, you want to make sure it's carefully controlled to make sure that we're delivering the highest quality of mussel.
It sounds like there's a sustainability component in there as well, of this kind of consistent source of high quality green lip mussel.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that green lip mussel is highly sustainable aquaculture.
I think that's great to put out there too. So that, it kind of that extra, like, I'm giving my pet something that's beneficial and doing it in a way that is, has the sustainability component as well.
Absolutely.
That's great. I don't think it was waffly at all. I think you have shared everything there, and now I'm going to retain that in my brain of green lip mussel and why it is important when it comes to joint health and things like that. Diving into the supplements a little bit more, we're talking about these high quality ingredients and what we're after and why these ingredients are beneficial. When we're looking at supplements, how can we kind of look at them with a critical eye? To your point with what you were saying, that the way that these green lip mussels are processed is going to have a big impact on the benefits that we're after. But just like not all green lip mussel is created equal, not all supplements are created equal. So how do we kind of evaluate these critically?
I think it's important as well, isn't it, Dr. Cass? Because actually our clients, I only worked in the UK, but I'm guessing it's exactly the same in the US. They will go out and they will buy these supplements. They really want to give their pets these supplements. So I think it's really important that we understand how to critically evaluate supplements so we can better advise our clients, I guess, do the right thing by our pet owners. So first of all, I think we've already discussed this really, is also checking that there are ingredients included that have a good evidence base. And that's something that we've already talked about in terms of reviewing the literature, seeing what ingredients are out there. You also want to make sure, I think this is really, really key, that the company takes quality really seriously. It's worth making sure that the products have batch numbers, for example. That's so important because then by having batch numbers, you can then track the ingredients all the way back to the raw materials. So if you have any issues, you're able to trace where you need to. You want to look at maybe the marketing claims that are being made as well. Are they realistic? Are they responsible? Or do they sound a little bit too good to be true? So I think that's really, really important. And also look for those recognized quality standards. So for example, you're very lucky in the US, you have the NASC seal of approval. So that's the National Animal Supplement Council. They set really strict guidelines around manufacturing, labeling, ingredient traceability. Companies often they do have to undergo regular audits. and actively monitor product safety as well. So that includes reporting any adverse events. So I think that's really important because certainly in the UK, yes, we have to report adverse events for drugs, but you don't have to do that for supplements. But I think it's a really important part of quality control is that we are reporting and we are recording and monitoring those adverse events as well. So I think they're really key things that you can look for. Probably last, but I don't think by any means least, is to look if the company is actively investing in science. Do they have a research and development team? Are they really optimizing their ingredients? Are they validating them both in vitro and obviously and in a clinical setting as well? I think that's really important.
I love that you bring up the NASC seal because I do think that is a nice way to just kind of at a glance say, okay, what kind of standards is this company holding itself to? Is there you said you don't have to report adverse events for supplements in the UK. Is there some sort of equivalent to the NASC seal in the UK?
There is not at the moment, which is a real shame. I think it would be really good if there was some kind of body like NASC. I think that would be incredibly helpful to the industry. For sure.
Well, and I think that kind of speaks to the importance of veterinarians and our role there, because as you said, pet owners, they want to feel like they're doing the best thing for their pets. And so they are going to go and they're going to try to look at these supplements and do their best to critically evaluate. But we have conversations like these where, kind of get to dig into the nitty gritty of some of these. And so putting our recommendations out there as veterinarians to just help cut through some of the noise in the supplement industry and say, here are, some ingredients to look for, supplements that, we recommend that we feel are safe and effective and these kinds of things to help offer that guidance to pet owners who are looking for that type of information.
Absolutely. I mean, they are looking for it. They're looking for help. They're looking support. So so I think it's a really great thing that we understand, the supplements that are out there, the ingredients that we should be looking for, and, the quality side as well, I think is so key to make sure those companies are obsessed, if you like, with quality as we should be.
Well, and speaking of that, of companies that are investing in science and quality and paying very close attention to these things, let's talk a little bit more about YouMove. I understand, along the lines of science that there are studies looking at the effects and the benefits. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the science behind YouMove?
I can, absolutely. So I think the key for us is that we also want to clinically validate what we deliver as well. So there's a couple of studies that I can certainly talk about with you. So one of them was a study done in the UK at a leading university with pet dogs that had joint issues. It was a double-blind, so everyone wants a double-blind, a placebo-controlled study. So looking at our original YouMove joint supplement, and it contained, again, our particular spec of green lip mussel, so our Activise green lip mussel, which we mentioned and talked about earlier. We wanted to use objective measures, and we actually went ahead and used activity monitors. So we were checking in on the activity of those dogs throughout the day. And what we found is that after 6 weeks of dogs receiving the YouMove supplement, we saw a statistically significant increase in activity levels compared to the placebo. So that was a study that was done a few years ago in the UK. And then moving on from that, we also do in vitro work as well. And what we found with the in vitro data is that actually with higher levels of our Activise green lip mussel actually seem to have a greater effect in vitro. So we wanted to know if this would also be reflected in a clinical outcome in dogs. So again, we actually worked with a leading university in New Zealand at this time, because obviously green lip mussels are found only in New Zealand. So it's a great place to do a clinical study involving green lip mussel. Again, this was a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, and it was done in working dogs. So kind of a nice little complementary. So we've got our pet dogs, but we've also got our working dogs as well. And they had
different levels of activity, different types of activity.
Absolutely. So they had underlying musculoskeletal issues as well. And what we did is we evaluated different inclusion levels of the green-lip muscle within those working dogs, within our products. Again, for an objective measure, we used activity monitor, but we looked at a slightly different outcome because these dogs were working dogs. We knew that actually they would probably do whatever their owner was telling them to do, right? Just regardless of maybe being in some discomfort. So actually what the university decided to do was to actually assess that top end of acceleration. So when they are running at their fastest, when they are sprinting after that sheep to make sure it doesn't fall off that cliff. That's when we were looking at them because we thought actually that's when we knew really going to see a difference. And again, what we saw with that after 8 weeks was the higher inclusion levels of green-lip muscle in the products that had those higher inclusion levels of green-lip muscle showed a statistically significant increase in acceleration during that high intensity activity compared to the placebo. And again, lower levels, actually, we didn't see the same effect. We saw a trend towards it, but we didn't see that statistical significance. And that, to us, indicated that was an amount-dependent response. So the more you give, the more green-lip muscle you give, the more impact that it has as well.
What a cool study. I'm also
Thank
kind
you.
of chuckling to myself when you said, running at its fastest, trying to keep the sheep from, I'm like, working dogs, like that is very different from the working dogs in the US. Like that's not what I would think they were doing. I love it.
Yeah, I'll have to have a comparison for working dogs in the US.
I don't know. I think that's my favorite one right there.
Stopping the sheep from falling off a cliff.
Yes, I'm like,
that.
oh, that's such a New Zealand working dog thing that, such a stark comparison to the US.
Oh, bless you.
Oh, goodness.
The other thing I was going to say, actually, from a science perspective, something I haven't mentioned, which I should mention, is we're also, as an R&D team, looking at different marine sources of omega-3s as well. So we're always on the lookout for interesting ingredients with really interesting profiles of omega-3 fatty acids. So one example, which we now use actually, is a marine source called hoki. So it's a whitefish, again, found off the coast of New Zealand. So there's a bit of a common factor there. And initially we thought, actually, when we combined it with our Activase green-lip muscle, it would probably have an additive effect. So 1 + 1 = 2. That's what we were expecting to see. And this was within our in vitro studies. But actually what we found was actually something a bit more interesting. So it appeared to have a synergistic effect.
Oh.
So when you combined the hoki and the green-lip muscle together, they delivered more than we would have expected from each ingredient on its own. So again, that's a combination that we use within our products as well, because we know that we have that synergistic effect.
Oh, that's 1 + 1 = 11.
1 + 1, yeah, absolutely.
That's great. So I think you're speaking to a lot of what you were talking about before in evaluating supplements critically, that R&D, and looking for ways to constantly be improving and delivering an effective product. Can I ask you one more question about the effects and the benefits when it comes to the YouMove supplements? You mentioned activity monitors. It sounds like accelerometers, things like this. Can you talk about why you chose activity monitors versus, say, like force plate analysis?
Okay. I mean, we were certainly guided by the universities that did the study, and their input at the time was that force plates, they give you a very precise snapshot in a sort of clinic type situation, but activity monitors do show how a dog is moving, I guess, in real life and over time. So I think it's a really good way of sort of capturing that day-to-day activity. So you kind of get a more complete picture of mobility and, ultimately the quality of life of that pet, which is really what we're trying to support. And certainly we now have our CMIs as well, so our clinical metrology instruments. And I think they're really valuable as well, because again, they capture that sort of real world lived experience from the owner's perspective. And I think that's really important. So again, things like quality of life are really difficult to measure objectively. So CMIs can just help to quantify some of those more subjective outcomes, but in a validated way. So that's something that in future studies, I think would be really useful to use.
That makes a lot of sense to say, it actually kind of feeds directly into where my brain was headed next, is that even if, a pet can put more weight on a joint, if they're not moving around more altogether, have we really benefited quality of life? And,
That's
that
right.
probably is a complicated question to really answer, but it makes a lot of sense to use that overall activity monitor since the outcome that we're looking for is this better quality of life overall. Along those lines, and thinking of keeping dogs moving around more and leaning into that quality of life for as long as possible, what are some of the other considerations beyond omega-3s, maybe even beyond joint supplements, that we should be keeping in mind when it comes to supporting joint health?
Probably, there are lots of other factors. I think, it's important that the owners know that, giving their dog a joint supplement, it's great. It's great that they're nutritionally supporting them. That's fantastic. But there's so many other things that they can do as well. And they must do, it's a multimodal approach to supporting joint health. It's never just sort of a one treatment or a one supplement. It's a multimodal approach. So I think one of the biggest factors, which will come as no surprise, is obviously weight management. Really, really key. Obviously, not only does excess weight increase that physical load on the joint, but the fat tissue is also biologically active, right? So that in itself can contribute to the inflammatory processes in the body, which may further impact joint health. So I think weight is really, really important. So again, if you can get those weight clinics running, that can be incredibly useful for the pet owner. Alongside that, maintaining good muscle condition is really key. So regular, moderate exercise can really help support mobility. So again, making sure the owners understand it's not about doing a really long 10-mile hike at the weekend and then doing nothing for the rest of the week. It's about doing that regular, consistent exercise to support the musculature of the dog and support those joints as well. There's lots of things you can do at home, obviously. And so environmental changes at home, like adding rugs for better grip, using ramps for cars or steps, raising the food bowl for those dogs that need it. That can make a big difference to dogs at home, and cats as well. I mustn't forget about cats. They're really important. And obviously we can think about additional support like rehabilitation. So again, you guys in the US have a lot more rehabilitation centres than we do in the UK. They're starting to pop up in the UK, but I think you're really lucky over here. You have a lot more rehabilitation centres that you can send these pets to.
What the rehab centers can do.
Exactly. So, and the physio and hydrotherapy, again, really incredibly useful. And I think this is a really important one. I think importantly, like, we shouldn't just think about older dogs. So there is growing evidence that younger patients can also be impacted with joint issues even before signs are picked up by the owners. So again, it's a bit of an education piece, and obviously prevention is the holy grail, and I haven't seen any evidence for that. But actually, but there is a question, isn't there, as to whether we can support joint health, maybe proactively through things like nutrition before obvious signs appear, especially in these younger dogs, because it's much more prevalent, I think, than we ever realized in our younger dog population.
Absolutely. And I think that goes back to the owner education piece of making sure that we're having these conversations early. However, as you mentioned right at the very beginning, a lot of times we are pressed for time in the clinic. And if we have, hopefully, an otherwise healthy pet, we may only see that pet for 30 minutes once a year, and there's so much to talk about in that time frame, especially if they do what so many people do. And I don't fault them for it, because I do it with my own physician that I go to, of like, well, I was coming in, so I figured I'd talk to you about this while I was here. And so now we're not doing a healthy pet appointment. Now we're answering, why have they been vomiting off and on, whatever it may be. So when it comes to that owner education, one of the areas I've been really interested in lately is how do we effectively educate pet owners outside of that annual exam appointment? Because I just think we're either going to say everything really fast and nothing's going to land, or we're going to miss opportunities to talk to pet owners about this. Do you have any thoughts on educating pet owners about keeping their dog a healthy weight and monitoring for signs of joint health earlier in life?
I think there's lots of opportunities, actually. Again, I think we're still learning about this in the UK as well. So I have just done a recent survey. Again, these are UK pet owners, not US pet owners, but there was a reasonable percentage of them weren't aware of the signs of issues with joints at an early stage. What they did say is that actually a large percentage of them would have gone to the vet sooner had they have known about those signs. So I think that education piece is really, really important. They also fed back that actually their preference is to go to sort of web-based resources, maybe that have been sourced by the vet. So you would then highlight, oh, why don't you look at this website? Why don't you look at that website? So that's done by us. So we're sort of directing them elsewhere, or perhaps it's an in-house website that may have been developed just to try and help support, obviously, very time-poor vets and vet nurses. So vet nurses are also a great source of education, and you can certainly get vet nurses to see maybe puppies and kittens on a regular basis, see them every 6 months. Think about putting some information in puppy and kitten packs as well. From our point of view, we also have our vet exclusive range as well. So we do have vet exclusive supplements. These are our strongest products that are available. And the reason we do that is that we know that owners that are reaching for the strongest product available, if they want those products, that actually we want to make sure that those dogs, those pets, cats and dogs, are getting the right care from their vet. So again, we want to make sure that they're going to see you, so they're getting the right advice, they're getting the right education, as well. They're not just taking that supplement and going, oh, it's all fine, I don't need to do anything else. So sometimes it's about getting them through the door, but it's also about having the resources to use with them as well once they are through the door.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like we're going to see this like emerging opportunity to study like human behavior and adult education and marketing and medicine all kind of like converge of how do we get the information? How do we cut through the noise and get good information out there in front of pet owners where, we can facilitate the conversation through multiple different avenues. And I think there's such an opportunity there. So I always love asking people about educating people outside of that one exam. I love what you said about veterinary technicians and nurses to say such a good source of information. We really need to be empowering staff members to, if they're doing those puppy boosters and it's not necessarily a doctor's exam, that, what a great opportunity to talk about skin or teeth or joints or, whatever it may be at that particular appointment.
And it could be a video in the waiting room, right? So it could be as simple as that. So they're just sitting, waiting in the waiting room. It doesn't take any time for us, but they're sat watching that video, understanding, learning more about how to support their dog's joint health. So I think it's so important. The other thing is, I think there are apps as well that are up and coming in terms of this. I suspect will be the future, that, that perhaps an owner will get an app when they first get a puppy or first get a kitten, and they might input some data about their pet's mobility at that time. And then they will continue to populate that app over time, over months, over years. And then you've got a nice baseline, haven't you? You've got that longevity data. You can see those changes as the pet grows and ages, and that will help, again, hopefully just keep the owner educated about looking out for changes, but also act as a resource for vets to check in and go, actually, we've seen quite a change in your dog's behavior, or maybe they're just not going upstairs like they used to, whatever it is, those kind of things. So I could see us using those type of technologies and AI. Of course.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. I think this will be kind of a slow adaptation over time to lean into how technology is going to help facilitate some of these conversations. But I love everything you just said. It just makes my head explode with the opportunities and the possibilities. And like, oh my goodness, think of the level of care we can provide with this type of information.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very exciting, Dr. Cassie.
It is. Well, Dr. Laycock, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I learned a lot talking to you, so thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cassie.
Thank you, everyone, for joining in. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Dr. Laycock, thank you for joining me. You were such a wonderful guest. I really hope we can do it again. Thank you to VetNeek for making this episode possible. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast to help other veterinary professionals like you find this and other great content we try to put out there. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode, as well as ideas for topics you'd like to hear from us in the future. Feel free to reach out to me at dvm@vetfolio.com. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Dr. Cassie DVM. And remember, if one animal is better off because of you today, it's a great day.